The stones of Rome still whisper tales of an empire that once spanned the known world, a civilization built on law, conquest, and an almost unimaginable scope of ambition. This story is not one of sudden collapse, but a long, agonizing decline, a slow erosion caused by a series of fatal decisions made by those who held the reins of power. Before we continue, please like and subscribe. We begin in the height of the Principate, an era of dazzling expansion where Roman ingenuity fueled an unstoppable momentum across continents. Generals, driven by personal glory and the promise of endless spoils, made choices that carved new territories into the Roman sphere. These decisions, born of immediate necessity and strategic vision, inadvertently sowed the seeds of future ruin. The very structure of the empire, designed for swift expansion, began to reveal its inherent fragility as it grew too vast to govern effectively. The sheer scale demanded an ever-increasing commitment of resources, manpower, and political focus. Decisions regarding where to allocate legions, how to manage the complex tapestry of provincial administration, and who would ascend to the imperial throne became increasingly fraught with tension. The need to secure the frontiers against relentless external pressures demanded constant military expenditure, a drain that began to outpace the empire's ability to sustain itself internally. One of the most profound turning points lies in the changing nature of Roman leadership itself. The emphasis shifted from civic duty and the traditional virtues of the Republic to the demands of autocratic rule. Emperors, increasingly reliant on military might to maintain their authority, began to make decisions based on immediate political expediency rather than long-term stability. The pursuit of peace often necessitated compromises with barbarian groups, treaties that, while offering temporary calm, ultimately weakened the empire's defensive posture. These diplomatic maneuvers, intended to secure the borders, instead created dependencies that would later be exploited by hostile forces. The internal political machinations of the later empire were equally corrosive. Successive emperors often prioritized personal power struggles over the welfare of the state. Decisions about succession were frequently arbitrary, leading to civil wars that consumed vital resources and fractured the already strained military cohesion. These internal conflicts diverted legions from the external frontiers, allowing external enemies to exploit the resulting weakness with devastating effect. The very concept of unified imperial will begin to dissolve into competing, self-interested factions. The economic decisions were another critical axis of decline. The relentless need to fund the massive armies and the extravagant court life placed an unbearable strain on the provincial economies. Policies concerning taxation, trade regulation, and the distribution of wealth were often implemented with short-sighted goals, designed to extract immediate revenue rather than foster sustainable growth. Inflation, debasement of coinage, and the disruption of established trade routes created a spiral of instability that undermined the very foundations of Roman prosperity. Military decisions, while essential for expansion, carried a heavy cost. The reliance on federated troops, groups of non-Roman peoples fighting under Roman command, introduced a new layer of complexity. While initially a pragmatic solution to manpower shortages, the loyalty of these forces was often conditional, and their integration into the imperial structure proved to be a source of future vulnerability. The strategic placement of legions, the management of frontier defenses, and the allocation of resources for these often brutal campaigns reflected a focus on immediate military advantage rather than the long-term security of the entire domain. As the pressure intensified from migrating peoples along the Rhine and Danube, the empire faced decisions of immense gravity. The choices made by those in power regarding the deployment of forces, the negotiation of alliances, and the distribution of imperial authority directly determined the fate of the civilization. These were not merely tactical maneuvers. They were existential choices that shaped the trajectory of history. The slow, inevitable fracturing of the interconnected system, driven by a series of interconnected, often flawed decisions, set the stage for the final, catastrophic unraveling of the Western Roman Empire. As the pressures mounted along the frontiers, the decisions made at the imperial center became increasingly desperate and brittle. Need to defend an ever-lengthening and increasingly porous border forced a brutal recalibration of priorities. Resources that once fueled infrastructure, public works, and internal stability were ruthlessly redirected towards the military apparatus. Provincial governors, caught between the demands of the distant court and the realities on the ground, often made choices that exacerbated local tensions. Local elites, facing heavy taxation and constant military demands, began to resent the central authority, viewing the imperial administration not as a guarantor of peace, but as an extractive burden. This divergence between the imperial ideal and the lived reality of the provinces created deep fissures within the body politic. The reliance on federated troops, while a short-term necessity, became a long-term liability. These groups, often fighting for their own survival or seeking advantage within the imperial system, became powerful, semi-autonomous entities whose loyalty was dictated by immediate military payoff rather than ideological commitment to Roman governance. As these groups were integrated, they brought with them different customs, different expectations, and different spheres of influence, complicating the already tenuous administrative structure. The emperors, increasingly isolated and often preoccupied with internal rivalries, struggled to maintain a coherent vision for the empire. Their focus shifted from the abstract concept of Roman civilization to the concrete, immediate demands of survival, often leading to policies that were reactive rather than proactive. Disintegration of centralized authority meant that local military commanders and ambitious regional leaders began to assert their own spheres of influence, carving out semi-independent domains where Roman law and administration held less sway. The economic strain was compounded by these military necessities. The flow of wealth, once a smooth artery of prosperity, became a strained channel, with immense sums constantly being siphoned off to pay for the ever-present threat of invasion and the maintenance of an unwieldy military machine. This created a feedback loop. Military demands necessitated further taxation, which further strained the economy, which in turn reduced the capacity to fund the military, trapping the empire in a downward spiral of decline. The grand edifice, once so seemingly eternal, was being chipped away, not by a single catastrophic blow, but by the cumulative weight of countless compromises, misjudgments, and the slow, agonizing failure of a system too large and complex to be held together by the will of its rulers. The whispers of the stones were no longer just echoes of past glory. They were the groans of a structure under unbearable strain, a civilization slowly yielding to the relentless forces of change and internal decay. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more.